The other night, I started to think about
unspecified childhood trauma.
This wasn't the first time that I remembered the event. For years, I'd forgotten that it happened, and it wasn't until college that the memory once again crept up and sat in my brain until it was the only thing in focus. Psychologists call this delayed recall. When something traumatic happens to you and you kind of forget about it for years until something essentially triggers that memory to the forefront. The memory itself isn't repressed, it just hasn't been retrieved and therefore hasn't been very easy to access. This is especially common with people who were abused as children. The memory isn't easily accessible, but there are things in daily life that sort of bring a piece of that moment back to you. It could be a scent, the touch of someone else, or just seeing another kid and suddenly feeling worried about them. Somewhere along the line of this memory returning, I was looking at my bookshelf in pursuit of a distraction, and I saw The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And in that state of mind, I was reminded of why I responded to this book so viscerally as a teenager, and how it probably means more to me as an adult than it ever did when I was in high school. Not because of how it explores adolescence, but for how it explores generational abuse and resurfacing memories of such abuse. Reading this was probably the first time I properly felt understood by a character, but in college, when my own memory of abuse returned to me, it meant more than it ever did. This book, the debut novel from Stephen Chbosky, was the first young adult novel I ever read, and the first one to resonate with me so deeply. Even before I experienced my own delayed recall, I saw a lot of myself in Charlie, and had a deep understanding of why he did certain things, like why he wondered about the relationships of others, why he just wanted for people to be happy, why the thought of certain things made him sad. I understood him. The Perks of Being a Wallflower has been a significant book since its release in 1999. It became significant as the best-selling novel published under MTV Books. It became significant with the cult following it cultivated throughout the 2000s. And it is significant for its timelessness, heightened by the 2012 film adaptation that boosted the book's popularity. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is abundant with themes pertaining to not only adolescence and growing up, but mental health, physical and sexual abuse, as well as the cycle that such abuse causes. Chbosky's novel regularly delves into explorations of adolescence and growing up, including the loss of innocence and precious naivety. When we look back on things, we tend to say that those times were simpler, or that they were better, when oftentimes, in reality, the time period is not without strain or strife. Rather, when we lived in that time period, we were young enough to not know about any of those tribulations that plagued us in the world we lived in. Ignorance is bliss, and childhood ignorance, childhood innocence, is the precious thing that fuels nostalgia. My generation isn't nostalgic about the culture of the 2000s, with tabloids tarnishing the reputations of everyone they could get their hands on, of Islamophobia starting to run rampant, but we get nostalgic about things that happened during the 2000s, like childhood favorite movies and TV shows, because they've become relics of a time in some of our youth, because not everyone had it easy back then. When we didn't know any better about the world, and might have been happier for it. Chbosky highlights the loss of innocence and the anguish of growing up with a naturalistic language that grows ever timeless. He wrote this book in 1999, and in 2012, not only was his adaptation successful, but his novel was able to maintain and then gain popularity because lots of kids were still able to relate to it. We often talk about how difficult it is to grow up or to adult, or whatever the latest terminology may be. Growing up in and of itself isn't this painstaking process. It's the things that come with it, like the loss of childhood innocence. There are instances in Perks where examples of innocence lost are more direct, like in the poem that Charlie reads. And the kids told him that Father Tracy smoked cigars and left butts on the pews, and sometimes they would burn holes. And the girl around the corner laughed when he asked her to go see Santa Claus, and his father never tucked him in bed at night, and his father got mad when he cried for it. But most of the time, the theme of lost innocence presents itself with physical and sexual abuse. More than coming of age, more than found families, the biggest theme in The Perks of Being a Wallflower is the overwhelming presence of abuse and the cycle it creates. Toward the end of the novel, Charlie experiences delayed recall of his own childhood abuse at the hands of his Aunt Helen, a person whom he loved and misses dearly. The memory is triggered by the first time someone, a character named Sam, sexually and consensually touches him, and he suddenly feels sick to his stomach. It's confusing for him in the moment, because the person who's kissing him is someone he wants to kiss, someone he's in love with, someone who he knows cares about him, and they're doing something he's wanted for a long time. And it was so beautiful. She was so beautiful. She took my hand and slid it under her pants, and I touched her, and I just couldn't believe it. It was like everything made sense, until she moved her hand under my pants, and she touched me. Charlie is unable to process the sudden sickness and dread he feels. He can't explain, can't make sense of it. The only thing he can do is cry. He and Sam don't end up going any further than that. And then later he has a dream about what happened, the memory resurfacing for the first time. When I fell asleep, I had this dream. My brother and my sister and I were watching television with my Aunt Helen. Everything was in slow motion. The sound was thick, and she was doing what Sam was doing. That's when I woke up. Abuse surrounds the characters in Perks, be it verbal or physical or sexual. And if the abuse isn't happening directly to them, they may be witnessing some form of it. Charlie witnesses a rape during a party at a young age. Within his own family, he witnesses his sister being hit and knows of the abuse his aunt and grandmother endured at the hands of their husbands. The abuse that surrounds these characters is a paragon of the way they contend with the violence around them and the cycle that said violence creates. Long before the memory of his own abuse at the hands of his Aunt Helen comes to the surface, Charlie recalls that his aunt was sexually abused as a child and that it had a lasting impact on her well-being. My Aunt Helen drank a lot. My Aunt Helen took drugs a lot. My Aunt Helen had many problems with men and boys. She was a very unhappy person for most of her life. The most affecting reaction to violence is from Charlie himself. Trauma plays a big role in this entire story and in Charlie's own development. He has a lot of trauma, not only from the abuse he experienced, but from the suicide of his best friend, Michael, which sent him into a depressive episode. Charlie is a very emotional person, often bursting into tears at signs of despair and decency. He cries when he sees something bad, and he cries when he sees something good. He feels everything quite intensely. The first instance we have of seeing his emotional state is on his first day of school, when a kid starts a fight with him, and Charlie, having learned how to fight from his older brother, hurts the other kid really badly. He isn't proud of this. He knows how to fight and he has no problem using it, but whenever he gets violent, he's overcome with sadness and begins to cry. Some kids look at me strange in the hallways because I don't decorate my locker, and I'm the one who beat up Sean and couldn't stop crying after he did it. I guess I'm pretty emotional. Around the same time every year, the depression that Charlie struggles with exacerbates in light of the anniversary of his aunt's death. When he describes his emotional state during the holiday season, he writes, "I can already feel myself going to the bad place I used to go to." Charlie's trauma has to do with his aunt's sudden death and the fact that he blames himself for it. He tries to deal with it on his own in a lot of ways, but his main way is distraction. He reads as a distraction, he goes to parties as a distraction, he starts to smoke as a distraction, and later takes drugs sporadically for a distraction. But there's no escaping his own mind. I don't know if you've ever felt like that you wanted to sleep for 1,000 years, or just not exist, or just not be aware that you do exist, or something like that. I think wanting that is very morbid, but I want it when I get like this. That's why I'm trying not to think. I just want it all to stop spinning. It's no secret that abuse and or neglect can have really bad effects on mental well-being. People who were abused as children are more likely to develop things like depression and post-traumatic stress disorder in adulthood. While after the assault, people can experience disassociation, where they start to feel disconnected from the outside world and from their own minds. We see this in Charlie shortly after Sam leaves for her early college course, and he says, "Finally, Sam climbed into her pickup, and Patrick started it up, and a great song was playing, and everyone smiled, including me, but I wasn't there anymore." Later, Charlie describes himself as coming back, suggesting that for a moment he stopped existing in his own body entirely. In this instance, when I talk about the cycle of abuse, I'm not referring to the cycle of abuse within relationships. I'm talking about generational abuse and how it sort of gets passed down again and again. The cycle of generational abuse can present itself in varying ways. Of course, that's not a guarantee. Not every survivor of abuse will go on to abuse their children. Oftentimes, children who were abused grow up to be especially loving and protective parents, wanting to ensure that their children never feel the way they did and never fall into that cycle of generational abuse. Charlie's dad grew up in a very physically abusive household. Growing up, his father hit him all the time. So Charlie's dad makes an effort and a vow to never hit anyone in his family. He hits Charlie once when he's little and apologizes for it right away, explaining that he made a promise to himself and that he broke it and that he'd never break it again, and he never did. Charlie's dad also makes sure he knows the importance of consent. The first time Charlie gets a date with Mary Elizabeth, his father comes to his room and tells him to wear protection, to listen to what she says, and if she says no, don't make her do anything she doesn't want to do, that it isn't right. He does his best to break the cycle he came into and to make sure his kids don't fall back into it. He could have become an abusive father, like his own father, and then blame it on his upbringing. When Charlie's sister is hit by her boyfriend, she makes Charlie promise not to tell, but he eventually mentions it to his teacher, who calls his parents. Charlie's dad goes to talk to the boyfriend's parents, and when he returns, Charlie wants to ask him questions, like how the boyfriend was brought up, whether his parents hit him or not. And Charlie's dad says, "Not everyone has a sob story, Charlie, and even if they do, it's no excuse." Even before his own memory of abuse comes to the surface, Charlie worries a lot about things like consent and healthy relationships. Even before he properly remembers, he does little things that signify his efforts to break the cycle of abuse that has befallen him. Shortly after he meets Sam, he grows attached to her and eventually has a sex dream about her, and he feels very guilty for it, going as far as to tell Sam about the dream and apologize for seeing her naked in his mind. Even Sam has a moment of breaking the cycle when she gives Charlie his first kiss. Sam was taken advantage of by an older man who was a friend of her family when she was very young. She and Charlie tell each other that they love each other. For Sam it's platonic, for Charlie it isn't. Still, Sam gives him his first kiss, and she's in tears when she explains to Charlie why she wants to be the one to give him his first.
I just want to make sure that the first person who kisses you loves you. Okay?
Even though Charlie has already made both conscious and unconscious efforts toward not becoming like the person who hurt him, he goes farther at the very end of the novel by making a plan to keep the cycle broken when he thinks about his future children and how he'll make sure to take their feelings into account and to really listen to them. But even if we don't have the power to choose where we come from, we can still choose where we go from there. We can still do things, and we can try to feel okay about them. I think if I ever have kids and they are upset, I won't tell them that people are starving in China or anything like that, because it wouldn't change the fact that they were upset. And even if somebody else has it much worse, that doesn't really change the fact that you have what you have, good and bad. Abuse survivors in film and TV and literature and journalism are scarcely painted with an understanding light. Perks remains not only a nice portrait of adolescence, but its portrayal of mental health and especially the experience of having such a violent memory resurface is well done. My first experience with memories of my own childhood abuse returning to me happened a lot like Charlie's. Whenever I see this scene or read this passage in the book, I break out into tears. It feels so real and reminiscent of what I experienced. In a sea of unflattering depictions, Perks was one of the first instances of showing an abuse survivor in a realistic and wholly sympathetic way. And while there are plenty of good things about Perks, I'll probably always remember it best for this.